Welcome to Talking Points. My name is Dr. Stephen Gardner, and I'm here to share with you our final segment on the Self-Saboteur. And I just want to thank you for being patient with us as we've been plugging along through this particular topic. I think this is a topic that we all should, at some time or another, do some self-reflection and find out, am I engaging in any kind of self-sabotaging behavior? And I believe that we all have, at one time or another, have engaged in some sort of self-sabotaging behavior. And that's what we looked at throughout this series. We looked at the problem, and we began to look at the solution. And today I want to, in our conclusion, I want to go back and capture some of the important things that we've learned in this topic, and then maybe highlight on a few things that I think that we all can incorporate in our life that will kind of help us address self-sabotaging behavior. So just as we get into this, be mindful of that am I a self-saboteur? If so, you're coming to the right place, because today we're going to provide a wrap-up as to what that behavior looks like and a outlook on, tools that you can begin to incorporate in your life so that you can overcome being a self-saboteur. So let's get right into this today, and let's see what we can learn. The Self-Saboteur, Part 5, the conclusion of the whole matter. In our series review, there were several things we learned about about self-sabotage. Self-sabotage refers to behaviors or thought patterns that hold you back and prevent you from doing what you want to do. On the one hand, it's behaviors. On the other hand, it's thought patterns. And in many cases, it's both and. Because why? Our behavior is usually tied to a thought. Our behavior is usually tied to a thought or a set of thoughts. So thought patterns, behaviors that hold you back. They're like this invisible electronic or electric leash that will not prevent you from going beyond where you are. I'm sure that some of you have seen these electric fences that they have for animals and especially pets, that if that pet goes past that perimeter and breaks that plane, as it were, they would get a little shock. And sometimes self-sabotaging behavior is like one of those thought patterns that's going off in our head so that we only will go so far. We only will progress so far, and then we cave in or we come up with some excuse as to why we couldn't complete what we began in. Self-sabotage, we learn, is when we say we want something and then go about making sure that it doesn't happen. Sound familiar? We say we want something, and then you do everything within your own power to ensure that you don't actually get it. And sometimes that self-sabotaging behavior may mean that to make sure that it doesn't happen is that I've got to come up with an excuse. So excuse and blaming. We blame other people as to, well, I can't do this because I said I was going to do it, but I can't do it because of what so-and-so said or these particular conditions. Or we come up with some other excuse. If you don't blame a person, oh, something happened at the last minute, so I can't really commit to that. It sounded good when they said they wanted to do something, but then they found a way to undermine that progress or that path that they had stated that they were going to take by manifesting or coming up with some sort of excuse. Denial. Now, we learn a little bit about denial, and denial, however, is one of those self-sabotaging behaviors. Denial is a defense mechanism in which an individual refuses to recognize or acknowledge objective facts or experience. It is it's a defense mechanism. So denial is a defense mechanism in which an individual refuses to recognize or acknowledge objective facts or experiences. And, sometimes, we talked about this, that one of the things that individuals go through when they've lost a loved one, that they may go through a moment or a period of denial. But that type of denial that's associated with grief is natural and normal. But this kind of denial here is the kind to where you just flat out refuse to recognize or acknowledge objective facts or experiences. And we've seen a lot of that manifested in the last, probably the last 18 months, almost 24 months in regards to COVID-19 and conspiracy theories that are fueling, non-vaxxers and the like, and other things, that are associated with that. There have been cases, sadly, that people even on their deathbed that were dying from COVID-19 were still in denial. They still were in denial about that which was very obvious in terms of their experiences or facts, and situations that probably could have been avoided had they, taken the vaccine. They could have, prevented themselves or prevented from passing on to others. This is not a COVID-19 talk, but I'm just using what happened out of that era that did manifest denial, where people, when you have objective facts or experiences right there in front of you, they refuse to acknowledge it. They refuse to acknowledge it. That is part of self-sabotaging behavior. We could go on and talk about other things where we can see denial has been used as a defense mechanism, where that person refuses to recognize or acknowledge objective facts. The one thing we learn about denial, it is an unconscious process that serves to protect the person from discomfort or anxiety. It is an unconscious process that serves to protect the person from discomfort or anxiety. And so what that means is that sometimes when an objective fact or an experience is too disconcerting, or information that is just too cage rattling, as it were, rather than try to process or attempt to process the truths and the experiences or the facts that are being presented, there's this unconscious process that just kind of kicks in, whereby it's there to protect the person from discomfort or anxiety. So, and that, again, those who are going through grief, denial is one of those episodes. This one of those stages that we go through. And so denial kicks in as this unconscious process to protect the person. And then eventually they come to accept the reality of the loss. But denial, when it comes to self-sabotage behavior, is an unconscious process that refuses to look at anything that that may challenge a particular worldview, may challenge a particular political stance, or just may challenge, reality itself, or maybe some discomfort or anxiety that's associated with what's going on in that person's life. That type of denial is an unconscious process that's what? There to protect the person. So it can have, denial can have positive and negative effects, but in this case, it's more negative because it's what you are, It's your intentional response to what? Objective facts or experiences. The truth is right in your face, but yet you deny it because why? That truth makes me uncomfortable. That truth creates anxiety. So therefore, I'm going to deny it. We also learn that procrastination has been researched as the most common self-sabotaging behavior. How many of us have procrastinated? I think at one time or another that we all have engaged in the process, or should I say, in the practice of procrastination. We say we want to do something, we set out to do it, and we say we're going to get around to it, we're going to get around to it, and next thing you know, there we are rushing at the last minute to try to get the thing done, or it doesn't get done at all. In our one of our earlier segments, when we talked about procrastination, we talked about it in light of getting college assignments or class assignments in. And I know some of you that are watching have gone to school, higher education and the like, and some have, of you have achieved, even some, other kinds of degrees, doctor's degrees, master's degrees, or whatever, where you are given a particular deadline that a particular assignment is due. And since we have been engaged in the last 24 months, that we found that a lot of schools have gone to an online program. However, there are schools out there that are already engaged in online programming, and the timeline usually is 11:59 on Sunday, and that's when all of your assignments that have been given for the week are due. How many of us, me included, have waited to try to work on that assignment probably on Saturday night, or either Sunday afternoon, and try to cram all that in so that that assignment can get in by 11:59? Because if it comes in after 11:59, it's the next day and you get points taken off because it's a day late. However, if I had one way I could have overcome procrastination was to, I know many people that are going to school online, they have full-time jobs. And so that's one of the advantages of going to school online, because why? I have a full-time job. I can kind of work, or I can work my class time around my particular work schedule and life schedule, as it were. And so what that means, that can give an illusion. Oh, I can get around to it. Of course, it's online. You feel more comfortable, but that can deceive you in many cases, because why? If you have not put in the time that's needed and segment the amount of time that needs to be given, you're going to wind up pushing the envelope. You're going to wind up maybe turning an assignment that was not properly cited, or that was not edited appropriately, and and there you go. Now you got a problem, because now what procrastination did, it caused you to self-sabotage the potential of getting the kind of grade that is an A or a B, whatever the case it might be. Now I'm looking at C work when I could have been doing A work, all because of the self-sabotaging behavior called procrastination. So that's one of the problems that are identified. Another eluding culprit is not admitting when you are wrong. This is a classic when it comes to self-sabotaging behavior. Most people will find somebody else to take the blame for what they have done wrong. It's a classic in terms of self-sabotaging behavior. And it's almost borderline or related to being a narcissist, to where most narcissists will not admit when they're wrong. What they'll do, they'll point that blame, or they'll point that problem to somebody else, or to some other system, or some other reason outside of themselves. They will never admit when they're wrong. A person that will not admit when they're wrong, you're looking at the self-saboteur manifested right before your very eyes. Because eventually it's going to catch up with them. And when it does, you know, they're going to have a fall. Why? Because not admitting when you're wrong is related to pride. The Bible says pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So the problem is that eventually it's going to catch up with you because why? It's self-sabotaging behavior, and it's going to be the very thing that brings you down or brings you to this rude awakening or your come to Jesus moment. Your perception of change. Well, let's look at that. Your perception of change. How do you perceive change in this context? How do you look at change in your own eyes? Well, in this case, you expect yourself to succeed in making life changes without designating any time or mental space to accomplish them. That's kind of related to what we just talked about in terms of procrastination. Because I could have got that passing grade. I could have not prevented myself from having to rush at the last minute to make that 11:59 deadline had I designated time or mental space to accomplish. Your capacity to change as being dependent on other people's behavior. See, that's, or should I say, you see your capacity to change as dependent upon somebody else. Well, if so-and-so does that, then I can change. Rather than owning the fact that, hey, I need to just give myself time and mental space to accomplish what it is that I need to accomplish. Okay? Having said that, one of the ways by which we can navigate is that sometimes we assess that, for example, here's the adage, don't bite off more than you can chew. Secondly, another metaphor in that regard is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Sometimes that in order to change, we have to take little increments, and rather than trying to delve or jump off the deep end of the pool, just wade yourself in little increments. Because what happens sometimes, if I'm in this habit of, well, I'm waiting to the last minute or whatever the case it might be, and I start out, and then because I haven't allotted the time or mental space, I fail. Well, what that does, it brings in I keep failing. It brings in a mindset that I'm failing. And so therefore I may resort back to what we just talked about before, where we said what? That it's one of those behaviors or thought patterns that hold you back. Or when we say that we want something, then we go about making sure it doesn't happen. Sometimes what happens is that repetitive failures creates a block in your mind that I can't succeed at this. So the way you perceive self-change, is key. If someone else is responsible for your change and you see that and that's your practice, that's a self-sabotaging behavior. So we want to be able to correct that. And sometimes the best way to correct something like that is, rather than trying to take on a huge project, you feel good about it, you are hyped about it, and then you fail at it or you struggle with it, all because you should have or should have considered, maybe if I do a little bit at a time, that I can have smaller successes, and that will help me to overcome, the inadequacy, that could come from repetitive failures or repetitive setbacks that came as a result of me not designating time or mental space to accomplish them. Another thing we've learned is believing that to state reality is a lack of faith. Now, let me say this. This is primarily to those individuals that believe that are faith followers, or should I say faith, people of faith, who believe in the positive confession related to scripture or related to life as being part and parcel of the success. Now, believe me, I am not knocking that. But what I am trying to highlight is believing that to state reality is a lack of faith. Now, the sky is blue, and that's real, but if I go out there and I say the sky is black or the sky is brown, or other than the fact of what is real, then I've concluded, hey, it's green. And I've been taught that it's green, and my faith preference is green, so it's not blue. But I'm denying that. So believing that to state reality is a lack of faith. Another way of looking at that is that this self-sabotaging mindset is related to the previous one, where we learned that through positive confession alone, I could transform reality. That's what we learned the last time. Through positive confession alone, I can transform reality. The truth is, it's going to take more than just positive confession to change your reality. It's going to take more than positive confession to change your reality. In fact, where your mouth is being, we need to make sure that you have feet and hands to go along with it. Why? Because faith without corresponding action is really not faith at all, or as the King James Version said, faith without works is dead. So, it is not a lack of faith to state reality. Case in point, if I go to the doctor and the doctor diagnoses me by whatever process of really trying to find out, whether it be a blood test or whatever case it might be, if I get a diagnosis and it says this or that, then if I state that, see, this is what that means. If I state the diagnosis that I was given, rather than state a scripture or positive confession that's opposite of that, if I state reality, to me, it's a lack of faith. Now, think about that. The doctor tells you that you have a cold or the flu. On the other hand, I have come to the conclusion I'm not catching a cold and I do not have the flu. So I'm not going to say I got a cold. I'm not going to say I got a flu, because if I say any of those things that's right in front of me, it's a lack of faith. I'm not believing in God's healing. I'm not believing in God's deliverance power. Well, let me tell you something. If we don't know what a problem is, how will we know how to pray? If we don't state what the reality is, how do we know how to address what's in front of us through the use of scripture, through the use of your experience with God? I'm just saying, we got to state the reality, and stating the reality is not a lack of faith, but it's a starting point towards your healing. It's a starting point towards your deliverance, because now you know what to pray for. You know who to pray with. You can gather your prayer warriors. Look, we need to be interceding on this particular piece here, because this is the diagnosis that I got. I'm not going to live in this world of denial and try to figure this thing out without engaging in sober-minded positive confession or sober-minded reality as regards to faith in God regarding what's going on with me. So, in this case, as we said before, some people believe that if I state what is reality, it's a lack of faith. So we need to think about those kinds of things. Like I said, this doesn't fit everyone, but I've been there. Oh yes, I've been there where I knew the doctor said this and I was in total denial and I'm not going to confess this. That's not going to come out of my mouth. To finally I began to wise up and get mature enough to realize, hey, these bodies break down and this is what's going on. So I can do one or two things. I can, along with following the best science, I'm going to pray that I get the healing that I want. And when I came to that kind of conclusion, I began to see a lot of positive results when it comes to these kind of things that are going on in my body. And hopefully that maybe this may help somebody deal with the stuff that's going on in your body. We also learn, or should I say, that understand that what others think of you is far less important than what you think of yourself. Now, when you get to a certain age, you notice that with, older people, especially your parents and your grandparents, that they'll just say, they have no filter. They'll just say anything. And they could care less about what other people think of them because they've gone through life. They have gone through the life of hard knocks, and they're now seasoned citizens. And so what? They could care less. They care far less about what other people think of them. It's what they think of themselves. Maybe we can learn something from some of our elders, that what others think of you is far less important than what you think of yourself. So what do you think of yourself? How do you view yourself? Who do you see in the mirror? A success or a failure? And if you see a success in the mirror, there's a reason why you see it that way. If you see a failure in the mirror, there's a reason why you see it that way. And so whatever comes to self-saboteur comes from an image that's projected in our minds and then is projected in our life through behavior that would undermine, and thought patterns that will undermine that which is going to cause you to be successful. We learn also about self-awareness. Now, self-awareness is a pathway to understanding who you are and the key to knowing what makes you do the things that you do. We learn, with that being said, it should be very clear that in order to overcome thyself, you have to know yourself. Whoa. Wow. It should be very clear that in order to overcome thyself, you have to know thyself. So self-awareness is a pathway to understanding who you are and the key to knowing what makes you do the things that you do. We also learn this, that recognizing your emotional triggers and coping mechanisms are key. Being able to recognize when you get defensive and how you show and how we show it is an impactful example of self-awareness. Let me say that again. Recognizing your emotional triggers and coping mechanisms. That is, being able to recognize when we get defensive and how we show it is an impactful example of self-awareness. I often use this particular example from the Bible when they tried to pressure Jesus into having this woman stoned whom the accusers had caught her in the very act. And they tried to pressure Jesus into giving an answer that they could basically hang him out to dry. Now, Jesus's role, he understood who he was. He was very self-aware of who he was. And yet he's in a tight spot. And many of us, when we have been in a tight spot, it's an emotional experience for us. We're under pressure And we learn how to respond while under pressure or react. React is a knee-jerk response, takes time to think about what it is that you're going to do. Even though I am emotionally uncomfortable, I'm going to think about my response. So what happened to Jesus, the law of Moses said that this woman should be stoned. They spoke the Hebrew scriptures. What do you say? Well, now his whole integrity and his whole self-identification is being put under test because he knew who he was. He was very self-aware that his mission was to seek and save that which was lost. And in this case, this woman is hanging in the balance of a wrong decision. And Jesus was hanging in the balance of a wrong response. And so he took a holy hush. I call it a holy hush. A pause, however. Let's go into that. He could have been saying, I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I know my core values. I know my mission. I'm here to save that which is lost. If I say this, the wrong thing is going to happen to me. If I say that, the wrong thing is going to happen to her. Sometimes in that holy hush and in that pause, where we take time out, catch a breath, think about it, what we're getting ready to deal with, we can have the response that's appropriate rather than a reaction that becomes tragedious. So he drew a line in the sand, he wrote on the ground, and he turned to them and said, who it is without sin among you, cast the first stone at her. And from the oldest to the youngest, they all filed away. The law of Moses said that you got to have at least 2 or 3 witnesses to condemn somebody of this particular act. So Jesus turned to the woman. He said, where are your accusers? She said, I don't have any. He said, I don't accuse you either. Go and sin no more. What Jesus did, basically his response eliminated the witnesses who said that they saw what it is that she did. She set free and he set free. He's able to be true to who he was as a savior, and she's able to have the kind of life that she can live differently. She can emerge and become a better version of herself. Recognizing your emotional triggers and coping mechanism can not only save your life, but the life of somebody else. Being able to recognize when we get defensive. You know, what caused you to ramp up in defense? And how you handle that is an impactful example of self-awareness. Well, I know we're wrapping this up today, and look, I could go on and talk about all different types of methods by which we can deal with self-sabotage. One that I don't have on the slide is self-care and self-love. Obviously, you got to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, nobody's going to take care of yourself for you. Taking care of ourselves means that, look, know yourself enough to know when you've been burning the candle at both ends. Take time out. Do something that's going to make you happy, something that's going to make you feel good. Do some self-care. You know, take a trip, go on vacation, or just simply take a walk in the park, or whatever case it might be. You have to give attention to self. Engage in maybe some mindfulness or either some meditation practices where you can learn some deep breathing exercises and the like to what? Calm yourself down. We talked about that before. Going to the doctor, the blood pressure's up. 5 minutes later, if you do the deep breathing exercises, you lower your blood pressure. All of these are episodes or aspects of self-care. Self-love is related to self-care because now you got to love yourself. Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So if you don't love yourself, you don't have any kind of rubric as to how to love your neighbor. You have no way of knowing what love is about towards your neighbor if you don't have a healthy self-love. love for you. Not to the point of narcissism, but to the point to where it's healthy. I know how I want to be treated. I'm going to treat you the same way. I love me, and I'm going to show my love, what I would do for myself, I'm going to do for you. So, but here's one on negative self-talk. Is something we didn't talk about the last time, and we're going to have some correlation between when we can use positive self-affirmation and how it can be applied to overcoming this self-sabotaging behavior. Negative self-talk and harsh self-criticism can affect our actions and prevent us from meeting our goals. It's frequently automatic, running through our minds unchecked as an instant reaction to ourselves, others, and situations we encounter every day. Listening to harsh self-criticism is a form of self-sabotage because doing so prevents us from believing that we have what it takes to achieve our goal. Fortunately, when you start paying attention to the type of self-talk you're using, you can take steps to overcome the effects. With awareness of the self-talking pattern, you can modify your thinking, improve your mental health, and reduce negative feelings. There are multiple ways to interrupt this negative thinking cycle. And one of those ways is through positive self-affirmation. Now, affirmation are positive statements that can help you challenge and overcome self-sabotaging and negative thoughts. When you repeat them often and believe in them, you can start to make positive change. So, a positive affirmation is something that you write down. And these are statements that are usually that target a specific area, behavior, or belief that you're struggling with. Let me say that again. Creating your own positive self-affirmation relates to what? Affirmation statements that usually target a specific area, behavior, or belief that you are struggling with. So now you're self-aware, I'm struggling here. You're not in denial. You're not refusing to acknowledge what you're struggling with. You're not discarding reality. I'm struggling here. But a self-affirmation statement targets a specific area, behavior, or belief that you're struggling with. You think about those areas of your life that you'd like to change. Okay? So now we're going to get into how we do this. You write down several areas or behaviors that you'd like to work on. And be sure that they're compatible with your core values. So what are the areas you like to work on? Write them down. What are the behaviors you like to work on? Write them down. Are these behaviors and areas compatible with your core values? Remember the last time we were here, we talked about everyone should have a set of core values. You should have your own personal mantra as to what you are really all about, as to what your purpose is in life. And if you don't have a purpose in life, then, that is something that you can work on. If you don't have core values, that is something that you can also develop. Thirdly, be sure that your affirmation is credible and achievable. Base it on a realistic assessment of the facts. Keep it realistic. Don't say, I'm going to fly to the moon when you don't even have a car, whatever the case it might be. I mean, the bottom line is this, that whatever it is that you want to achieve, make sure it's credible. Now, I've heard a positive a motivational speaker say this years ago. He said, what the mind of man can conceive and believe, the mind of man can also achieve. That is true. It takes an envisioning of a desired future, but it also requires those steps toward that desired future. You can believe it all you want, but if you don't have any steps that's going to move in that direction, if you don't set any goals, whether it be small, medium, or large goals, you're not going to go anywhere. So be sure that your affirmation that you write down is credible and achievable. Turn negatives into positive. If you're struggling with negative self-talk, note down the persistent thoughts or beliefs that are bothering you. Then choose an affirmation that's opposite of that thought and belief. That's something you can do on your own. I could give you some examples, but that's something you can do on your own. What is a negative self-talk? Then choose an affirmation that is opposite of that thought and belief. Write your affirmation in present tense. Write and speak your affirmation as if it's already happening. In present tense, I am a successful person. That means right now I am. I am taking necessary steps to achieve greater success than I've already accomplished. Write your affirmation in present tense. And lastly, say it with feeling. Affirmations can be more effective when they carry emotional weight. Affirmations can be more effective when they carry emotional weight. Say it like you mean it. Put all of your soul into it. Put everything you got from the gut into that affirmation statement. Well, this concludes this series on the self-saboteur. We've looked at the problem and we looked at the solutions. We looked at some mindsets. We also looked at some techniques to get out of those mindsets. There are loads of literature that's out there that will help you deal with self-sabotaging behavior. I would encourage you to use Google and go into and just put in the word self-sabotaging behavior or how to overcome self-sabotaging behavior, and it'll give you a plethora of literature and places that you can go to really get a good look at how to overcome that which has been overcoming you based on thought patterns and based on behaviors that have prevented you from what? Achieving your desired goal and success in life. God bless you. I trust this series has made a difference in how you think about yourself and what to do about it. We'll see you here again next time on Talking Points.